Hello and welcome to the top custom Hearthstone cards of the week. First up we have God Waggle, 10 mana, 8/5 neutral legendary, with the battle cry, shuffle both decks together and share them equally between each player. This kobold took too many candles. So with this battle cry, you're combining your deck with your opponent's. Instead of having two separate decks, now both of you draw and share one single deck. If you end up drawing some combo pieces that your opponent would have needed, then basically their win condition no longer exists. Decks that run out of value quickly could end up using this to then share cards with their opponent, and another nice touch is you could both reach fatigue at the same time. Also, from now on, anytime either of you would shuffle cards into the deck, either of you could end up getting it. And with Hakar, shuffling Corrupted Bloods would just mean chaos for both players. It's a fantastic concept having both players draw from one single deck. It completely ruins everything to do with deck building and Hearthstone, so I like this card as a meme and as a legitimate play to counter combo decks, but I think just having it be a 10 mana minion is a little bit too easy to get. If there was some sort of quest where this was your reward, I think it would just benefit the gameplay if it took a little bit more work in order to get this card. When the user finally completed the quest, hopefully combo decks would have somewhat of a chance in order to draw their combo. God Waggle is an absolutely crazy concept, so I'd love if they made this a tavern brawl first, just to see how the gameplay would work out. Next up is a Blazed Imp, 3 mana 3/2 Warlock Demon with spell damage +2, and whenever you cast a spell, deal 3 damage to your hero. So spell damage minions have always been a little bit tough because the effect can be so powerful, but it's at the cost of the minion's stats. This card is a 3 mana 3/2, which isn't anything crazy, but having +2 spell damage is a pretty big deal. With this out on the board, your Defile could start by dealing 3 damage, and your Hellfire could deal 5. Combo this with Mortal Coil, and it's a really decent removal. The downside is obviously your hero takes 3 damage, and if you're using a card like Hellfire, that means you're taking 8, which is quite a big chunk. At 3 mana, it is still a bit expensive to use this as a combo piece with the other removal cards, so maybe if the damage was even higher, like 5 mana, you could reduce this card's cost to 2, and maybe its stats to a 1/2. I like the idea of spell power in Warlock, especially if they weave some sort of self-inflicted damage effect, then I think it could be a great flavor for Warlock. Next up is Bandit Archer, 4 mana 2/3 hunter minion with the battle cry, deal 2 damage, and overkill, add a copy of this to your hand. So the battle cry of this card would be able to satisfy the overkill, which means if you played this and targeted a 1 health minion and killed it, you would activate the overkill and get another Bandit Archer into your hand. But even if your battle cry doesn't end up overkilling a minion, out on the board this 2/3 would be able to overkill and add another Bandit Archer to your hand. Now in terms of the stats and the battle cry, this is very similar to Fire Plume Phoenix, but I'd argue that the overkill is a really powerful effect. Again, not only can you use the battle cry to satisfy the overkill, which guarantees you'll have a Bandit Archer in your hand at all times, but it also makes the 2/3 more of a threat out on the board with overkill, even if it doesn't have the 3 attack. This could be a really solid value card for Hunter. You can't argue that 4 mana for a 2/3 is not really that great, but the battle cry is basically 2 damage of charge, and so whether you want to activate the overkill or not, you're still getting value right away. Bandit Archer is great because it's super flexible. You could try to get all that 2 damage value clearing an enemy minion and not necessarily get the overkill. But if you're able to set up the right turn, you can consistently keep a Bandit Archer in your hand and make some pretty decent plays. I would love to see this card in Hunter. Next up is Stolen Grimoire, 2 mana rogue secret that reads, when your opponent plays a spell, shuffle 3 copies of it into your deck and give them cast when drawn. This would be a great addition to rogue secrets. Spells are really powerful cards in the game, so adding that value to your deck would be pretty useful. Even if you don't get the value right away, for non-targeting spells usually this would benefit you, but for buffs and damage dealing spells, this could cause some trouble. Dino-sizing your minion one turn and then your opponent's the next, and maybe pyroblasting your opponent's face 3 times in a row. That would be tough to do. This basically takes whatever spell your opponent plays and turns it into a Scroll of Wonders for your deck. Which reminds me, what happens if your opponent plays Scroll of Wonders to activate this secret? That would add a lot of scrolls to your deck. I'm also not sure if it would also draw a card after you drew one of these shuffled copies of a spell. I'm assuming it would because it would be pretty detrimental not to draw another card. I'm just gonna guess that the creator didn't want to write all of that on this secret. Rogue's always been pretty weird, only having 3 secrets, so I think Stolen Grimoire would be a fun addition to the game. Next up, we have Skipper, Entrepreneur. 3 mana, 3/4 neutral legendary, where at the start of the game, if either player completes a daily quest this game, double its reward and give it to both players. Honestly, I think this should be a end of game card, but that doesn't really matter. It's a nice meta card where you can play a decent 3 mana 3/4. It doesn't really help your game plan all that much, but if you have a bunch of daily quests and you feel charitable to your opponent and also want to get some double gold yourself, then why not put Skipper in there? I don't think Blizzard would ever print this card, even though I think daily quests should give a little bit more. So who knows, maybe this would be a way to incentivize that. I would definitely not be opposed if this was put in the game. Next is Holy Hand Grenade, 3 mana priest spell, where after 3 turns, destroy all minions. So this is a cheap board clear, but at the cost of taking a super long time. Regardless of what minions are out on the board when you play this, after 3 turns, whatever is out on the board gets destroyed by this card. And obviously, if you play this when your opponent is threatening lethal, then it's not really going to do a lot. You have to try to plan ahead, still survive for 3 turns, and then you'll be able to kill everything out on the board. In a way, you're basically wasting 3 mana on 1 turn, and then if you make it 3 turns later, you get a free board clear. It's super slow, but if your game plan revolves just around taunts or death rattles or resummoning big minions, then this can be an effective tool to clear more aggressive enemy boards and let you re-establish board control. Just think, if you're not playing a very aggressive deck, you could use this on turn 3, play a couple of taunts, and it really doesn't give your opponent much incentive to play any minions. And maybe that's also kind of one of the issues with this card. If your opponent is close to lethal, then they can try to go and kill you, but if they're playing an equal pace deck, then they really aren't going to want to contribute a lot to the board because they know they're going to lose it in 3 turns. Would it slow it down way too much and make it kind of boring for both players? Or would it be a fine dynamic that would actually create some interesting game moments? It's really tough to tell, and even if this was in the game, I don't know how powerful it would be and if people would even run it. Next up is Starving Atrocity. Oh my god, reminds me of my old boss. 5 mana, 4/3 neutral minion with the battle cry, destroy minion with 7 or more health. So this is sort of a take on Big Game Hunter, which destroys minions with 7 or more attack. That card and Shadow Word of Death all prioritize big scary minions with a lot of attack. But more and more we're starting to see a lot of powerful minions that tend to prioritize more health. Obviously, it's going to be different deck to deck and meta to meta, but from game to game, there's likely going to be a chance to use Starving Atrocity. The one instance where this probably isn't going to work out too well is against aggro, who just doesn't really play big minions like this. It's an interesting idea. I wonder if it would actually be more useful than Big Game Hunter. Next up is Split-Necked Dragon. 6 mana 4/6 neutral dragon with rush and only damages minions next to whomever this attacks. So if your opponent has a board of 3 minions and you attack the middle minion, Split-Necked Dragon will take the damage for the minion it attacked like normal, but it's only going to deal damage to the 2 minions adjacent to it. And I think this is an ingenious card. It's similar to Cave Hydra, but the rush and higher stats makes it so much better. Being able to attack right away is obviously great because you can guarantee value and set up the turn that you want. And the difference between 2 and 4 attack is a world of difference when trying to clear minions. And so while this minion doesn't actually deal any damage to the minion that it attacks, you can still target really small minions so that your dragon doesn't take a lot of damage, and you can deal the 4 or more likely 8 damage to 2 bigger, scarier minions. You're cheesing the system by being able to trade into enemy minions and avoid their attack. Once again, I think this would be a great card, and even though 6 mana is a bit of an investment, you're able to get value right away, and I think you're going to easily be able to find the right play. Really great card for clearing boards, and I think you could consistently get some pretty strong board clearing power with this. And last up we have King Midas. 5 mana 4/4 neutral legendary with rush and overkill. Add a golden copy of the minion killed to your hand. This card utilizes the Rush Overkill combo, which is a pretty good way of guaranteeing that you'll get the overkill value. Midas has a Zola-like effect, adding a card to your hand, and it's especially nice that it's golden given this card's name. But you're only targeting enemy minions with this card, and if you plan to get this overkill value, then they have to be at 3 or less health, unless you're also buffing Midas. And once this baby is out on the board, you know your opponent is going to try to get rid of it right away. So it's definitely a powerful effect. It's not like Undasta where the overkill gives you value right away, but it's still a decent rush minion that can get you tons of value. Definitely a cool take on Zola the Gorgon. Alright, those are all of the cards for this week's top custom Hearthstone cards of the week. Just made a Discord that you can join where you can talk to the community about cards you make, cards other people make, Hearthstone in general, and whatever you want. Link will be pinned in the comments. You can check out last week's episode and the last Misunderstood Cards episode. They're both now on the screen. That is all for now, and until next time, ta-ta.